I'm going to pass over now to James. James Harvey, are you okay, James? You've got someone to film for you?
No, it's all right.
So, James Harvey. I met James. I'm trying to think when I met you, James. I think so, yeah. And then we just started sort of speaking together about 15-minute cities and different issues. And what can I say? You're very James is very impressive. He's out doing things all the time. You get a lot of flack, don't you, James, for what you do? But you keep going. And James, as some of you know here, did you actually set it up, or was it with other people?
What was this?
Students Against Tyranny.
I set that up on my own.
Yeah, so James set up Students Against Tyranny, which has been doing amazing work in trying to sort of assemble students and activate them and educate them about their rights during lockdown and beyond. So put your hands together, please, for James Harvey.
Thank you. So firstly, I want to thank Debbie Hicks for inviting me and organising this, and as well as Keith and Sue, who also do some amazing work in Cardiff. Now, really quickly, I do want to respond to your point regarding cryptocurrency, and I'd love to hear Simon's opinions on it later. But the way I've always looked at cryptocurrency, as good as it sounds, it looks like a honeypot trap to me. And the reason I say that is because all of these people who are against the central bank digital currency and all of that, they are promoting cryptocurrency as a new form of payment over cash. But the problem is that even if you're promoting cryptocurrency and it's anonymous for now, right, eventually they're going to eradicate cash because no one's using it, yeah? And then everyone's going to be using cryptocurrency, but then the government can come in and pass new legislation like they did in China, where you can no longer use cryptocurrency. They make it illegal. So cash, we need it. Even if you want to use cryptocurrency for the time being now, it's just as important to promote cash. But as I said, I'd love to hear your opinions on it later. So for those who don't know who I am, my name is James Harvey. I'm a 20-year-old activist and founder of Students Against Tyranny, which is a collective organisation of young people opposed to institutionalised Marxism and the shutdown of free speech within universities. Now, as much as I would like to take you down the route of explaining Marxism and its systematic takeover of universities, today's topic is about promoting the use of cash and the inherent issues that come with a cashless society, and how we could potentially bring students on board to fight against what is coming. Let me tell you a story. So it's the height of the pandemic, and I travelled from university to my parents' place for a brief stay before heading to Barry the next day. Every week I would come down to work a cash-in-hand job. Love cash, right? Less tax paid on it, so it's just, it's much easier, isn't it? So upon arriving at my parents' local train station, I saw that the ticket machine didn't take cash, right? And assuming I could purchase a ticket on the train, albeit at a higher cost for an in-person ticket, they make you pay higher if you want to pay in person with cash. If you didn't know that, it's like double the price, right? So I boarded the train and began my journey. Unsurprisingly, as was normal throughout the pandemic, a ticket collector didn't come by during the ride to make me buy a ticket. Instead, I had a security man come around asking to wear a mask. I bet you can imagine how that went. So I reached my destination and immediately noticed that the revenue inspection team was at the station exit. Now, whilst approaching them, I observed that they were checking if people had tickets and fining those who didn't, right? So when I got there, I basically asked, hey, I haven't got a ticket, but I was wondering if I could buy one. The ticket machine didn't take cash, I've only got cash. He pulled out a card machine. They didn't take cash. So what do you reckon he did? Well, despite my explanation, they tried giving me a £30 fine. A £30 fine for using cash. Luckily I fought it and won, but it just goes to show that we live in a day and age where using illegal tenure can land you in trouble. And this isn't the only incident. I can name numerous examples of times it feels like I've been punished for using cash. And I know most of you have probably felt the same way. Now, does anyone here know what communism is? The simple yet most important description is where the state owns and controls everything. This is what will soon happen. no, sorry. This is what will soon happen to your money. It will no longer be yours. No longer owned by you. This is because Big Daddy government will decide where, when and how you spend it. This applies to young people in particular, who these days value efficiency above all else, using smartphones and contactless payments to avoid the trouble of using cash. I know, privacy, such an inconvenience. A lot of people seem to be under the misconception that it is young people who are least likely to use cash, and there is some debate as to whether this is true. A study from UK Finance found that people from in the 18 to 24 age range were just as likely to use cash as people in the 45 to 54 age bracket. And it was people between 25 and 44 who were more likely to use alternative forms of payment. Whether I believe these figures are still up for question, considering I don't know a single young person outside of this movement who still uses cash. And that's, again, despite my personal objections. So I'd go out on a Friday night at uni with 20 odd mates, and they'd all be paying by card, literally every single one of them. Same when I'd go shopping in Lidl, which is like a 5-minute walk from my student accommodation. Every young person in there would be using a card, though that may be because they only had one managed till open at a time, and all the self-serve checkouts used card only. So you'd have to so I'd go in Lidl, which is my local shop. There was no other local shops near me, really. I'd have to walk like 15 minutes. So I'd go into my local shop. I just want to buy like a Coke or something, right? And I'd have to queue up in a massive queue just to use the only managed till with people who were doing their monthly shopping in order to use cash. Do you get what I mean? You're all being punished for using cash. So, and I mean, the nearest ATM as well when I lived in Swansea was like a 15-minute walk away, or was like 20-minute walk away, right? And I lived in quite a busy area. It's mad, isn't it? So now, cash is no means my area of expertise, but I want to take this moment to speak all the students at home who may be watching this on a camera, or if you've got any young people, you can pass on the message. So as I mentioned in a previous Keep It Cash speech, which I did in Bristol, I once saw an HSBC advertisement on the way to Scotland. It said, when an abuser controls your finances, they control you. And it reminds me of the income and social credit system. In this case, the government is the abuser. The government, through central bank digital currency, and using the pandemic as a scapegoat, have already admitted they want to eradicate cash. I mean, during the pandemic, it was saying that that coins and stuff like that, they can transmit viruses, and so a lot of businesses decided to stop using cash, right? So once cash is eradicated and a central bank digital currency is formed, the government will be able to see how, when and where you spend your money. They will also be able to implement legislation which prohibits us spending money which contravenes the net zero agenda. Are we seriously talking about trusting our government with the ability to do this? The same government that talks about climate change while flying on private jets to COP conferences. The same government that willingly arrested and extradited Julian Assange for exposing war crimes. The same government that passed a bill restricting your right to protest. Are we seriously considering this? Are people still hypnotised into believing the government would never do that? Because I bet you that's exactly what the people of China would have thought. Now I'm going to mention a few controversial names here. Listen, as Debbie mentioned earlier as well, right, I know these are very divisive topics. The only reason I'm mentioning the names isn't, you don't have to necessarily agree with the person I'm mentioning. What I'm trying to portray is how dangerous having a cashless society is. So, this isn't the only concerning part. Both Nigel Farage and Tommy Robinson had their bank accounts cancelled for wrongthink. Nigel was able to get his back. Tommy has been banned by around 14 banks. And this is still ongoing. Regardless of your thoughts on him, isn't it concerning that they are willing to cancel someone's bank account for political reasons? Especially if they are now considering a cashless society. During lockdown, they did what they could to keep us locked in our zone. And this as if we were prisoners. If they win at the war on cash, they could freeze your bank account if you leave your zone. They don't even need a pandemic to do that, considering it's now all being done under the guise of climate change. UN global proposals state one item of clothing, limited petrol, ration food. This is all linked to the removal of cash. People call this a conspiracy theory. These are on the government websites, on the UN websites, on the World Economic Forum websites. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is happening. When they remove cash, they control you. Cash, as Debbie again mentioned earlier, it's the final straw. So how can we bring more students on side to understanding the importance of cash and its uses and encouraging them to use it? There's a man called Yuri Bezmenov who defected from the KGB as a propaganda agent to Canada. Whilst working for the KGB during the Bolshevik Revolution, he explained that snowplowing student editorial offices and organisations with literature of class struggle propaganda was one of the ways they indoctrinated students into the communist agenda. Now, while I'm obviously against the use of ideological subversions and propaganda, we can take lessons from this. Now, whilst out with Debbie in Bridgend earlier this year, I think it was this year or last year or something, a man told us that it's not the older generations we've got to focus on, it's the younger generations. Instead of purely leafleting outside of shops and town centres, we need to target the places where young people are going to be. We need to do that more often. The reason so many Marx-inspired revolutions utilised students, whether that be the Bolsheviks, Mao, Pot, Khmer Rouge, etc., was because they saw young people's enthusiasm and dedication as applicable traits they could use. We need to focus on leafleting universities outside of nightclubs and even student accommodation. Yes, we should also focus on leafleting businesses. I mean, that's just as important. But getting the young people on board is vital if we want to stop this in its tracks. Think of it like this. Hypothetically, say we handed in a petition which successfully stopped the central bank digital currency. We haven't stopped it. All we've done is delayed it. Once the older generation fizzles out, I don't know how to put it there. Sorry everyone. It's younger generation. It's the younger generation that are going to be dictating socio-economic policies. And if the younger generation are still indoctrinated and won't fight against the incoming Great Reset, then they are going to bring central bank digital currency back. So in order to fight for your future children, for your future grandchildren, we've got to get the students on board. Otherwise, all we're doing is delaying it and delaying it and delaying it until 40 years later, it happens. Now listen, we have launched a way for young people to join Students Against Tyranny for free. So if you know any young people, please direct them to www.studentsagainsttyranny.com/join. I have left some leaflets on your tables, Students Against Tyranny, so just, get them involved. We're building up quite a big movement. So I also believe that social media campaigns via services like TikTok, which is widely used by the youth, I don't like it personally because it's run by the Chinese Communist Party, and funny enough, the people of China have a completely different TikTok to the one we use. They have one where it's only education and stuff like that, so it's all about dumbing it down, isn't it? I mean, the attention span of young people these days is absolutely ridiculous. They can only, watch 7 seconds of a 1-minute video on TikTok. It's ridiculous, isn't it? And then you've got new editing styles created by YouTubers like Mr. Beast, so now everything is so fast-paced and their mind's all over the place. It's about dumbing down the younger generations, that's what it's about, right? But services like TikTok and workshops at universities are other ways we could bring them on board. I'll talk about this later with Debbie, but I believe we can work together in this sense. Young people are typically drawn to the moral luminescence presented to them by political ideologies like socialism. So I think predominantly focusing on the fact that the elderly who struggle with technology are being victimised by this system is a great way to get them on board. I mean, it's pretty evident that they love virtue signalling. They love the moral superiority complex that comes with a lot of these left-wing ideologies. That's why they've all got their hashtag I stand with Ukraine and all that same old stuff, isn't it? So now, previously we organised a webinar for young people on the truth about climate change, and regardless of your thoughts on that, again, we had a climate expert who all he was doing was presenting an alternative argument, one that young people aren't hearing. I mean, universities always used to be the bastions of free speech, where you'd go to explore these new ideas, new concepts, whereas these days, they're predominantly on the left side of things. You don't hear about anything on the right. I mean, most universities don't even have a debating society anymore, and that's because they go to a debating society, then get triggered and go home crying about what was said. I mean, yeah. Yeah. I don't know how they're going to handle World War III. So this was rather successful, with over 100 people booking tickets, and majority of them were young people who went to university. So I believe that webinars like that is pretty successful, though the problem with webinars and events like that, and it's not throwing shades on any events people organise, but a lot of things that we do these days is kind of preaching to the choir. So we need to figure out ways we can get to the crowd that aren't exposed to these ideas at all. And that's very difficult to do. So something else we've done, Debbie again was here for this, and Paul Burgess was as well. We went up to Oxford University and we set up a table and did a debate, a Change My Mind debate, if anyone's watched Stephen Crowder, right? And it was what was the topic? It was green energy is unworkable and unaffordable, change my mind. Yeah? And we debated students on whether it was efficient, whether it was cost-worthy, etc. And that was absolutely fantastic. It was a brilliant day, and we got a lot of good reactions from young people. But seeing their kind of... It's funny how they can believe something with not knowing anything about it, in the slightest sense. For example, climate change, they believe in that, but don't know a single thing about it. And it's just everything these days, they believe in something so adamantly that it's true, but then don't know a single thing about it, don't know any arguments, don't know any facts behind it, any scientific evidence, they know nothing. And that's the sad reality of what is going on. But moving on, right, China has 700 million surveillance cameras with facial recognition technology, which means there is one lens for every 2 citizens. China has a social credit system with their banking systems comparable to the UK government's proposed installation of the central bank digital currency. We're heading down an eerie path of communism unless something is done soon. And again, you know, I've done a great speech on this at a UKIP conference. If you look at any communist revolution throughout history, I mentioned a few of them earlier. Yeah, I'm almost done. Yeah. Sorry. So if you look at Bolshevik Revolution, Khmer Rouge, Communist China, you know, Mao's Cultural Revolution, all of that, and they always utilise the work of the students. Every single time they recruit students to do it, and it's pretty much every time they've been led out of the universities, right? So I believe that in order to stop this incoming communist agenda, because that's exactly what it is, we need to target the universities and undo the brainwashing they're all facing. They are lying to you, plain and simple. And to the people of Cardiff, they have already closed Castle Street. They have already put plans in place to implement a congestion charge. ULEZ is next. You need to fight this now, before it's too late. The problem isn't necessarily the older generation. It's going to get to the point where your future kids, your future grandkids, are never going to know what true freedom is. There's a book by Ant Middleton called Last Man In, and he puts it perfectly. Everything starts with you. Join Keep It Cash. Young people, join Students Against Tyranny and help us secure a future for the children of Britain. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, James. It's as I said, I thought some really interesting points, you know, very relevant points there that you've made about cash and students, and I think you're absolutely right. I mean, it's not something, you know, sometimes we can't do everything, but it's not something I've thought enough about what we need to do to address talking to younger people. Because actually, when we have had conversations in the high street with the younger people, actually quite a lot of them, if they engage, actually get it. It's just getting them to engage, isn't it? Getting them to talk. So you're right, we've got to get into those environments a bit more. And I suppose for us of sort of older generations, James, we're probably a bit scared of do you know what I mean, going into the bars or the outside the I don't mind doing it, but do you know what I mean? It's a different culture, isn't it? And a different, you know, way of engaging. But we do need to do it. You're absolutely right. So thank you so much, James. So our next speaker, Jonathan Till. Now, Jonathan and I have got to know each other over the last year through, I think originally through Mr. Piers Corbyn, when you were